first Sunday of Advent, I thought it would be nice to go through, to a certain extent, what Advent actually means. It is a season we get every year. It's a word that comes around. You know, we light the candle and we have our little calendars with chocolate or glowing lights and things. But we don't often talk much about what the season actually means, where the word itself even comes from. So I want to help illustrate that and put together why, when we're talking about Advent, we have a reading out of the small apocalypse of Matthew. Because I think that's odd for a lot of people to hear. So to help make sense of this, I need some assistance. We're going to do a little skit, and I need 6 volunteers, either of the young or old variety. I will not complain either way. There's no speaking parts. You don't have to talk. I'll kind of narrate. I just want to have something to show what's going on here. So I need 6. We have an emperor of Rome and the governor of an important city. And important people here. Don't worry. Nothing embarrassing. It'll be all right. Need at least 6. I can do with a couple more than that if we get them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. All right. Who wants to be Caesar? Okay, good. We have Caesar here. It doesn't matter which one. This is the Emperor of Rome. All right. Who wants to be the governor of the city of Thessaloniki, who is an extremely important large city in the ancient Roman Empire? Okay, we have a governor. Yay! All right. So, Emperor, you get to pick your adjutant. You pick someone, your ambassador, the person that follows around with you. Okay. All right, and then the governor has to pick someone as well. They're sidekick. All right. They each have their sidekick now, and these 2 lovely women are going to be citizens of the city. All right. So if I could have the emperor and assistant head back a little ways. All right. I promise this will make sense at the end. Okay. All right. This is an event. This was a regular, almost ceremonial event in the ancient world, okay? So the emperor is going to be visiting the city. And so in preparation, the emperor sends forward the emissary, or someone ahead of them, to come just a little ways ahead, not too far. And as they come towards the city, it's called the cry of command, literally, but they basically tell everybody to clear out the streets. And they get the riffraff out of the way, so push the riffraff out of the way. All right? And then they blow the trumpet so that the governor and the governor's cronies all know that the emperor is on their way. So, whatever, the trumpet blow. So then the governor and assistants come running to meet the emperor, and they meet usually right at the city gate here, and then they chat for a second and head into the city to do important business, letting the townspeople return to their regular daily activities, getting the joy of watching the emperor go. All right. Thank you very much for assisting. All right? Yeah. This event in the Roman Empire was called Adventus, which is where we get the word Advent. It comes from a Greek word called parousia, not that anyone really needs to know that, but it has this awkward double meaning of both arriving and being present. And it is an extremely uncommon word to be used in the Bible. It only appears in a few particular places. And where it does appear, it is not, in fact, talking about Jesus' birth. This is never referred to as the Adventus, as God coming into the world. It is a kind of Advent. Yeah. Is that not working? Hello? Okay, sorry. Thank you for the microphone change. It is a kind of Advent, but if you were to ask the very early church about what Advent meant, if you were going to talk about a season of Advent, the word isn't talking about Jesus' birth. In fact, it's talking about the apocalypse. Advent is about our hope for the future, not necessarily a remembrance for the past. So in the book of Thessalonians, Paul talks about the parousia, the coming of Christ, that we hope for, that we wait for, that we are looking for day by day as we go through. And so too in Matthew, in the reading that we had today, it's not talking about Christ's birth, but it's talking about the coming of the Son of Man, the return, and all of the good things. I know apocalypse has a really terrible connotation these days. Thank you, Hollywood. But the good things that are supposed to come around with that, peace and justice, the beating the swords into plowshares and things like that. So this is what Advent comes from. It is the visitation of the highest ruler to a place. That's not usually, I think, what we think of with Christmas, is it? We go back to Nativity, and I don't want to downgrade Christmas. I'm just saying the season of Advent, we developed our own calendar as a church, and we decided that when we were looking back to Christmas, to Christ coming into the world, we want to prepare for that by looking ahead to our expectation of Christ. I don't want to blow apocalypse out of the water here either. When Matthew talks about it, he's using it a little different. If I'm going to complicate this a little bit more for people, because that's what I enjoy doing. When Matthew is talking about this, the coming of the Son of Man, I think it's important we look at the whole series that he uses. So this is the very beginning of a big chunk in Matthew. He sits on a hillside with the disciples, and these are kind of private teachings to the community. And he starts with, you don't know when it's going to happen, so don't worry about it a whole lot. We're really good at the worrying about it thing, the whole Mayan calendar 2012 ordeal, and a couple years before that there was the Harold Camping thing. I only remember that because Nora and I went out and got ice cream just in case it was real. But the scripture clearly says, don't worry about it too much, hope for it. But the key is to be prepared, to live it out on a day-by-day basis. That faith matters now and going forward, not just retroactively. We're not just about remembering. We are about living. And so at the very end of this section on apocalyptic, the coming of the kingdom, there is a beautiful, beautiful story about judgment, which sounds funny. But the separating of the sheep and the goats, and it's really hard to find a good picture of sheep and goats. So, the story isn't quite that sweet, but you get the idea. But in the story of the sheep and the goats, when people sit before Jesus, presumably before the judge, he doesn't ask them, what they remember out of Scripture. It's not about how, did you do your daily prayers and did you celebrate this holiday and things like that. What the judge asks is, why, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was sick, were you there to take care of me? When I was in prison, did you visit me? It's about, the judge asks about living out their faith. And some people, the sheep, the judge says, you fed me. But in both cases, the response is, when did we see you? Right? When did we see Jesus? When we're walking through our daily lives, I don't often turn the corner and I'm like, oh look, it's Jesus. Hey, haven't seen you in a while. High five. I mean, we don't often think that way, I don't feel. But for Matthew, the Advent, the parousia, the presence and coming of Christ is in those in need. Right? Jesus is present in the least of these. In everyone we come across on a daily basis that needs our help in one way or another. And not condescending that needs our help, that needs to be recognized and to be seen as a representative of God. That's what Advent is about. It isn't about looking backwards. It's about living our faith forwards. Because the very last line of Matthew, where this reading comes from, remember, I am with you always, to the end of the age. Well, if he's with us always, then it's really, really hard to tell when he's coming, right? You will not know the time of the day, only Father, because we never know when we're going to come around the corner and see someone who needs us. We never know when we walk out the doors here and see something going on, when we talk to a friend who's struggling, when we ourselves are hurting and need someone else. It's really hard to tell when those times will be. So Jesus says, always be ready. Advent is about an orientation to life, about where we're facing. To a certain extent, it is very important to understand our past, to look at Christmas, right? And then into Lent and Easter and Pentecost and all those things. Those help us understand who we are and where we come from. Our stories shape us and mold us and determine where we are. But our stories, our past, are always moving us forward. Time flows one direction. And so, as we come into Advent, I want to make sure we know that we are not moving away from Jesus. We're moving towards him. That Jesus is always in front of us, not just behind us. It's really easy for the church, not us, but church, to think about our faith as being about the past. Because that's where most of our stories come from. Because that's where all stories come from. But the stories are there to remind us that life moves forward. And so do we. And so, we are going to sing a beautiful, beautiful song that is